Tolkien confessed that a scene from his books had moved him to tears even as he committed it to paper. And though this scene provoked such emotion in Tolkien, it was omitted from Peter Jackson's adaptation of The Lord of the Rings, not even making it into the extended cut. The scene in question captures a poignant moment shared between Frodo, Sam, and Gollum as they climb the perilous steps of the pass of Cirith Ungol, drawing ever closer to the lair of Shelob. Samwise Gamgee is known for his unwavering loyalty and steadfast love for Frodo. Therefore, he is a cherished favourite of many fans. But Tolkien, ever attuned to the complexities of his characters, saw more within Sam than simple, untarnished virtue. In letter 246, Tolkien provides us with an insight into Sam's character, laying bare the darker aspects of his personality. Sam was cocksure and deep down a little conceited, but his conceit had been transformed by his devotion to Frodo. He did not think of himself as heroic or even brave, or in any way admirable, except in his service and loyalty to his master. That had an ingredient, probably inevitable, of pride and possessiveness. It is difficult to exclude it from the devotion of those who perform such service. In any case, it prevented him from fully understanding the master that he loved, and from following him in his gradual education to the nobility of service to the unlovable, and of perception of damaged good in the corrupt. Tolkien succinctly reveals much within this short passage, and though his words are few, they brim with meaning. Tolkien begins by describing Sam as cocksure and a little conceited, meaning he is naturally confident and perhaps even a bit self-important. However, his sense of self-worth is tied not to personal ambition, but to his role as Frodo's servant and protector. And therein lies the delicate flaw in Sam's relationship with Frodo. Sam's love carries an element of possessiveness and pride. To devote oneself entirely to another is often to claim, in some way, a right to their well-being. Yet, the most profound part of the passage is Tolkien's observation that Sam's fierce loyalty is ironically detrimental to their relationship, as it prevents him from fully understanding Frodo. As their journey progresses, Frodo changes. He begins to see the world through weary, sorrowful eyes. Through pain, he gains wisdom. He learns to feel compassion for even corrupt beings such as Gollum, and recognizes the inherent tragedy in those who have been tainted by the darkness. This is what Tolkien means by Frodo's gradual education to the nobility of service to the unlovable, to show kindness to the wretched, to see the lingering ember of humanity in the most corrupt. This is the truest form of mercy. Thus, Frodo's heart opens to Gollum in painful recognition. But Sam, unyielding in his simpler view of morality, has not reached this level of understanding and is unable to comprehend why Frodo shows Gollum kindness. Consequently, he mocked Gollum, calling him cruel names like Stinker and Slinker. A part of Tolkien's brilliance lies in these quiet revelations. Even in Sam, one of the most steadfast and beloved characters, we find flaws. His loyalty is true, yet imperfect. His love is unwavering, yet possessive. Sam plainly did not fully understand Frodo's motives or his distress in the incident of the Forbidden Pool. If he had understood better what was going on between Frodo and Gollum, things might have turned out differently in the end. The scene at the Forbidden Pool unfolds in the films much as it does in the books. Gollum, ever elusive and wary, is coaxed away from the water by Frodo. He is then seized, and though Frodo's intent was to spare his life, Gollum initially believes that Frodo tricked him. In the films, this moment becomes a wound that cannot heal. Gollum's bitterness festers. Even as Sam insists that Frodo never wished him harm, Gollum's heart hardens. Whatever frail affection he held for Frodo is cast aside. From then on, the path he chooses is clear. He leads Frodo and Sam onward with a single, dreadful purpose: to deliver them to Shelob. There is no longer any flicker of uncertainty in his mind. But in the book, the threads of affection that bind Gollum to Frodo are not so easily severed. Though the sting of Frodo's trickery leaves its mark, Gollum ultimately understands that Frodo saved his life. Gollum, for all his flaws, is not a creature without reason. He understands that Frodo did not wish for him to suffer. And Faramir himself informed Gollum that the only reason he had spared his life was due to Frodo's prayers. And after the trio took their leave of Faramir, Gollum confirms that he held no lingering resentment towards Frodo.
"Have they gone at last?"
said Gollum.
"Nasty, wicked man. Smeagol's neck still hurts him. Yes, it does. Let's go."
"Yes, let us go," said Frodo. "But if you can only speak ill of those who showed you mercy, keep silent."
"Nice master,"
said Gollum.
"Smeagol was only joking. Always forgives, he does. Yes, even nice master's little trickses. Oh yes, nice master, nice Smeagol."
In the books, Gollum wavers, uncertain and torn, even as he leads Frodo ever closer to the lair of Shelob. And even as the sheer rocks of Morgul Vale rose before him and the darkness of his purpose closed in, what remained of his moral resolve fought against the ring's influence, which compelled Gollum to lead Frodo to his death. By temporizing, not fixing, the still not wholly corrupt Smeagol will towards good in the debate in the Slaghole, he weakened himself for the final chance when dawning love of Frodo was too easily withered by the jealousy of Sam before Shelob's lair. The term temporizing refers to Gollum's tendency to delay decisive action or commitment. This indecision is corrosive, allowing his darker instincts to gain the upper hand. The phrase, "not fixing the still not wholly corrupt Smeagol will," confirms that there was still a goodness within him, represented by the Smeagol side of his persona. However, by failing to be decisive and solidifying this goodness, Gollum weakens his own moral resolve. The debate in the Slaghole that Tolkien speaks of is the scene at the end of The Passage of the Marshes, where Sam wakes to hear Gollum locked in debate with himself.
"We want it, but..."
And here there was a long pause, as if a new thought had wakened.
"Not yet, eh? Perhaps not. She might help. She might, yes. No, not that way,"
wailed Smeagol.
"Yes, we wants it. We wants it."
Each time that the second thought spoke, Gollum's long hand crept out slowly, pouring towards Frodo, and then was drawn back with a jerk as Smeagol spoke again. Finally, both arms, with long fingers flexed and twitching, clawed towards his neck. As we can see, Gollum's better nature protests the idea of leading Frodo to his death. Gollum never finishes this train of thought, as Sam interrupts him. So, as he does not come to a decision, he temporizes, as Tolkien puts it, meaning he puts off the decision for later. It is important to understand why this decision was so hard for him to make. Gollum had been cast out, shunned and abandoned. Love, companionship and understanding had long eluded him, until Frodo. In Frodo, Smeagol had found a kindred spirit, perhaps the only one in all of Middle-earth who could truly fathom his torment. And due to Frodo's kindness, Smeagol felt understood for the first time since the ring came to him. Frodo and the ring were the two things in the world that Gollum loved, and he could not have both. Even as they ascended the treacherous pass of Cirith Ungol, passing the fortress of the Nazgul, perched upon the knees of the mountain, he had still not come to a decision about what he would do. Before they reach Shelob's lair, the hobbits are weary and decide to take some much-needed rest before continuing on to the ominous tunnel. It is then that Gollum slipped away into the darkness, leaving the hobbits alone for a while. And as Frodo slept with his head cradled in Sam's lap, Sam too succumbed to exhaustion. And so Gollum found them hours later, when he returned crawling and creeping down the path out of the gloom ahead. Sam sat propped against the stone, his head dropping sideways and his breathing heavy. In his lap lay Frodo's head, drowned deep in sleep, Upon his white forehead lay one of Sam's brown hands, and the other lay softly upon his master's breast. Peace was in both their faces. Gollum looked at them. A strange expression passed over his lean, hungry face. The gleam faded from his eyes, and they went dim and grey, old and tired. A spasm of pain seemed to twist him, and he turned away, peering back up towards the pass, shaking his head, as if engaged in some interior debate. Then he came back, and slowly putting out a trembling hand, very cautiously he touched Frodo's knee, but almost the touch was a caress. For a fleeting moment, could one of the sleepers have seen him, they would have thought that they beheld an old weary hobbit, shrunken by the years that had carried him far beyond his time, beyond friends and kin, and the fields and streams of youth, an old, starved, pitiable thing. In that still and quiet moment, the sincerity of Gollum's affection for Frodo is made apparent to the reader. There is no cunning now, no twisted ploy. Both hobbits lie asleep, unaware of his presence. There is no one to deceive, no eyes to witness. Therefore, we can discern with all certainty that the emotion that stirred within him in that moment is genuine. And as his gaze drifts back up the winding path, the weight of his betrayal lays heavily upon his conscience. And there in the gloom of Morgul Vale, the hobbit he once was, returned. For a fleeting heartbeat, the path before him shifts. He teeters on the edge of redemption, nearly deciding to relinquish the ring and to remain true to Frodo. But then, like the bitter winds that swept down from the dark peaks of the Efel Duath that loomed above them, Sam's harsh words shattered his moment of introspection. But at that touch, Frodo stirred and cried out softly in his sleep, and immediately Sam was wide awake. The first thing he saw was Gollum, pawing at Master as he thought.
"Hey, you!"
he said roughly. "What are you up to?"
Nothing,
said Gollum softly.
"Nice master."
"I dare say," said Sam. "Where have you been to? Sneaking off and sneaking back, you old villain."
Gollum withdrew himself, and a green glint flickered under his heavy lids. Almost spider-like he looked now, crouched back on his bent limbs with his protruding eyes. The fleeting moment had passed, beyond recall. Sam's harsh words caused the delicate thread that held Gollum back from the abyss to snap in that very moment. And it is this tragedy that brought Tolkien to tears as he wrote it. He wept for the lonely old hobbit that might have been saved if not for Sam's inability to take pity upon him. I was probably most moved by Sam's disquisition on the seamless web of story, and by the scene when Frodo goes to sleep on his breast, and the tragedy of Gollum, who at that moment came within a hair of repentance, but for one rough word from Sam. This means that if it were not for Sam's actions in that pivotal moment, the hobbits could have avoided that dark tunnel that awaited, thick with webs and crawling with ancient hunger. Tolkien confirms in letter 246 that before this point, Shelob's lair was not a certainty. For me, perhaps the most tragic moment in the tale is when Sam fails to note the complete change in Gollum's tone and aspect.
Nothing,
said Gollum softly.
Nice master.
His repentance is blighted, and all Frodo's pity is wasted. Shelob's lair became inevitable. We should not blame Sam for his actions, for due to the situation and circumstances, few would have acted any differently towards Gollum. He was not to know the consequences of his actions, and those actions were after all based upon good motivations in their essence. He desired to protect his friend from Gollum. Yes, this protection may have been tainted with jealousy and pride, but the essence of Sam's actions were good. This is due, of course, to the logic of the story. Sam could hardly have acted differently. He did reach the point of pity at last, but for the good of Gollum, too late. Of course, in none of these quotes does Tolkien mention that he wept over this scene. That is because his admission was not put down in writing, but rather made at a quite exceptional event. In March of 1958, Tolkien was the guest of honour at a hobbit meal in Rotterdam, Holland. He had never before accepted such an invitation and never did again. In a wonderful exchange, which was recorded between Tolkien and Professor Lambers, Tolkien makes his admission. "Is there really no deeper meaning in The Lord of the Rings?" asked Lambers. "It's just a story, it's just a story," reacted Tolkien passionately. "Yes, but a story with a message," continued Lambers, and he argued the moral background of The Lord of the Rings. As an example, he took that impressive scene on the border of Mordor, when Gollum bends over the sleeping Frodo, torn between Gollum's love for the ring and Smeagol's word of honour to Frodo not to take it. The crucial element in this scene, according to Lambers, is distrust, which causes good to act as evil. Gollum is mollified by the vulnerability of the sleeping hobbit, and is at the point of redemption. But Sam, misguided by the love for his master, intervenes and thus prevents the rebirth of Smeagol. Sam's goodness makes the goodness of Gollum impossible. And Tolkien answered, "I wept when I wrote that." Here, Lambert makes a stirring defense of Tolkien's work, as Tolkien modestly states that The Lord of the Rings is just a story. Of course, The Lord of the Rings is technically just a story. Yet, that is no bad thing. Storytelling remains our oldest and truest compass. Stories are the echo of the voices of the past. They bind us across time and distance to those who came before us, and remind us of who we are. And stories can teach us lessons we didn't know we needed to learn, heal wounds we didn't know we carried, and awaken dreams we forgot we ever had. And stories, of course, can move us to tears. Thus I will leave you now with the immortal words of Gandalf. "I will not say, do not weep, for not all tears are an evil." Thank you very much for tuning in to Realms Unravelled. I would like to take this opportunity to light the beacons and call for aid. If you did enjoy this video, I would be very grateful if you would click the like button below and consider subscribing to the channel. And until next time, farewell fellow explorers of Middle-earth.